Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, as promised, today we're going to take a look at BazBattles, Battle of the Bismarck Strait. This will be kind of a continuation of our conversation about the hunt for Bismarck that we started with the reaction videos on extra history. It's really dark here today because it's been storming all day, so the lighting's not the best today, so you might notice a little bit of trouble with my green screen. I apologize for that. I've tried to do the lighting as best I can in here. A couple of real quick things before we get into this video today. I will have more videos coming very, very soon. I'm finishing up the editing on part 2 of my trip to Georgia and Tennessee, which is going to be my visit to the National Medal of Honor Heritage Center, which was a fantastic brand new museum that I got a chance to visit. Among other things that are there, they have Desmond Doss's actual Medal of Honor. His uniform is there. Really cool museum. A lot of interactive stuff. Great place to take kids. So that'll be coming probably tomorrow or Saturday at the latest. In the meantime, I posted a link to my friend JD's video from the Currahee Cleanup Project from History Underground. Great YouTube channel you guys should check out. But I posted that as an announcement today on the channel and also on Discord, and you'll see me throughout that video. So check that out if you would. Let's go ahead and dive into this. Big thank you to our now 87 patrons over on Patreon. If you want to consider doing that, all the money that we raise on Patreon goes toward a travel fund for me to do additional original content for you guys. So I hope you'll consider doing that. All right, here we go.
This video is sponsored by World of Warships. Download the game for free using the link in the description below and use the promotional code to propel your start. It's late spring of the year 1940. Following the rapid overwhelming of France and Low Countries, which gained Germany an unchallenged position in continental Europe, Hitler now attempts to knock the last major power in Europe out of the war. Yet the ensuing battle for domination over British skies proved the valor of the Royal Air Force pilots and capability of British industry.
And we should not once again forget to mention that it wasn't just British pilots. You have the 303rd Squadron, for example, who were Polish pirates who were just incredible in their bravery and what they were able to do. And there's been a couple movies made about that. You had Czech pilots. You had pilots from other nations. You even had a few American pilots in there. But this was really was an allied effort to defend Britain in the Battle of Britain. And even though they just had severe losses, they also crippled the Luftwaffe to the point where the air war could not continue effectively,
resulting in a first major defeat for the German war machine. Independent from these air operations above the English Channel and British soil, the German Kriegsmarine challenged the mighty power of the Royal Navy over its long-standing hegemony at sea. This daunting task was of vital importance to the Germans, as Great Britain, though a global power, being an island nation, was heavily dependent on imported goods and raw materials. Thousands of commerce vessels crossed the Atlantic every month, helping to keep the British economy running, and both directly and indirectly supporting its war effort.
And if you actually look at some of the numbers involved, just look at the numbers of ships that were sunk. I mean, there was a massive amount of shipping that was sunk by U-boats. It's ridiculous the number of ships they sank. And yet, that gives you an idea of just how much was being shipped across the channel, that they sank that much and still could not slow down what was happening with the supplies that were coming. And the reason that they stay hugging the coast here, obviously you want this part of the journey to be as short as possible because this maximizes how much you can provide air cover. Because once you're within range of your Air Force, that offers a really high level of protection against the U-boats and things like that. So you want the amount of time you're at sea out of air cover to be as short as possible.
Of course, the Germans were fully aware of this vulnerability, and since the war broke out in 1939, one of the main tasks of the considerably weaker but rapidly expanding Kriegsmarine was to undermine British sea commerce and thus hinder its military industry and economic potential. This spanning sea campaign, known today as the Battle of the Atlantic, lasted for nearly 6 years and had a crucial impact on the war in Europe.
I actually want to give you some statistics on the Battle of the Atlantic, so give me 1 second. Let's look some stuff up here. Okay, so here you go. This is just... All right, here we go. Total Allied sinkings. This is from Sea Lanes in Wartime, the American Experience. So total Allied sinkings during the entire Battle of the Atlantic. The estimate is that 5,150 ships were sunk for the Allies total, 3,663 of them in the Atlantic. Now, the numbers vary depending on which source you look at, but they all look to be somewhere around 3,000 to 4,000 ships were sunk by the Germans in the Atlantic. Over 13 million tons of shipping were sunk. 30,000 merchant seamen died for the Allies, as were thousands of men from the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force. So that's just a ridiculous number. 23,000 U-boat crew members. Or no, I'm sorry, that's 23,000 were lost to the U-boats. Boy, that's just, I mean, just wrap your mind around 3,700 ships were sunk. I mean, that's just crazy to me. All right, let's continue.
It is to this backdrop that our story unfolds. It is the 21st of March of 1941. Two German battleships, the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, sailed back to the port of Brest following their moderately successful 60-day-long raid on Allied trading lanes. This action served two purposes: the tying down of a significant portion of the British home fleet with the presence of German capital ships loose on the northern Atlantic, and also to serve as support for a small yet deathly effective U-boat fleet, which at the time was highly successful, performing its mission to hunt down Allied merchant convoys crossing the Atlantic. The German Naval Command, under Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, was pleased with the results of the sortie, which either captured or destroyed 22 ships, and immediately decided to carry out yet another commerce raid.
So you can see why they want to do this, because first of all, Bismarck is a dramatically larger ship than Scharnhorst or Gneisenau. These are what you call pocket battleships. They're kind of a hybrid between battleship, battlecruiser, heavy cruiser. They're not quite battleships the way we think of battleships. They're smaller than that. So imagine what Bismarck and Prinz Eugen can do if they get out there. So I can see where the thinking is.
But this time, utilizing all four modern German battleships. Such force operating on the Atlantic could pose a formidable threat not only to Allied commerce convoys, but even for the British Royal Navy. But this plan, dubbed Operation Rheinübung, faced certain difficulties from the onset. Both Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were out of action for at least several months due to engine and torpedo damage respectively, while the newest battleship, the Tirpitz, was still undergoing crew training. This meant that the only fully operational capital ship at the time was the pride of the German Navy and leading ship of her class, the Bismarck. Grand Admiral Raeder was determined to have his capital ships raiding the Atlantic convoys as soon as possible.
All right, and because this always comes up, I'm going to address it once again. He said her class, talking about Bismarck, and I know there will be a bunch of you that say, but Bismarck's a he. All right, let's talk about this real quick. The idea that Bismarck was known as a he goes back to one source and one source only, and that was the highest-ranking surviving officer from Bismarck that survived Bismarck's sinking. According to him, Captain Lindemann, who was the captain of the Bismarck, said that a ship that powerful should be known as a he. And he even claimed that Captain Lindemann required the men on the bridge to refer to Bismarck as he. That is it. That is the one and only one source we have referring to Bismarck as a he. No other contemporary source used that. It's the claim of one person who survived, and we have no way to verify that claim with anybody else who survived. Everyone else called Bismarck a she. Bismarck's sister ship, Tirpitz, was known as the Lonely Queen of the North, was definitely known as a she. So it has nothing to do with the fact that Bismarck was named after Otto von Bismarck, because Tirpitz was also named after a man, but was definitely a she. and it has nothing to do with the fact that Germans call their battleships he. That's not the case either. This is a single source, one person, and it's kind of become one of those things in lore that everybody thinks is really cool to share at parties. Hey, guess what? Fun fact, Bismarck was a he. Not really that accurate. Honestly, for me, either one's fine. If you call Bismarck a he, whatever. Calling it a she is perfectly acceptable as well.
Because he wanted to avoid the expected cuts on the naval budget in light of the upcoming German invasion of the Soviet Union, where the Kriegsmarine wouldn't play any significant role. He opposed the idea of opening the Eastern Front, believing that it was the United Kingdom which posed the greater threat to German hegemony in Europe. Regardless, preparations for the Bismarck's sortie into the Atlantic began. The only other serviceable ship with enough endurance for such a mission was the Prinz Eugen, an Admiral Hipper-class heavy cruiser, which was subsequently added to the Bismarck's task force. Raeder appointed trustworthy Admiral Gunther Lütjens to take command of Operation Rheinübung, who soon raised his flag on the Bismarck. Raeder wanted to begin the operation in late April, during a new moon period and with favorable low visibility conditions. However, due to a couple of issues with the Prinz Eugen, both ships remained in port until the middle of May. Worth mentioning is that Lütjens tried to change Raeder's mind regarding the upcoming sortie, and he advised Raeder to wait until at least one of the 3 unavailable capital ships could join the Bismarck's mission. Lütjens, more than anyone else, was aware of the danger the sortie could spark, as he had commanded the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau's successful Atlantic raid months earlier.
So here's a guy that's got experience with the task that they're asking them to do, to go out and do raiding on Atlantic shipping. And he's kind of warning against doing this without at least one more ship. And imagine, look at what Bismarck and Prinz Eugen were able to do. Imagine if they had had one of those other battleships with them. The Gneisenau or the Scharnhorst could have been that much more difficult to take them down.
Yet Raeder was unable to yield to Lütjens' wishes, and he instead convinced Lütjens of the necessity of the presence of German capital ships on the Atlantic, even if it meant just one battleship would be involved in this operation. Late in the evening of the 18th of May, the Prinz Eugen departed Gotenhaven, and 5 hours later was followed by the Bismarck. Both ships rendezvoused in the western Baltic, and with the assistance of 3 destroyers, they steamed through the Great Belt, heading to the Norwegian Sea. Yet Lütjens' operation didn't remain unnoticed for too long. While passing through Kattegat, the German battle group was sighted by a Swedish seaplane cruiser. A day later, while refueling in a fjord near Bergen, was again sighted by a British reconnaissance Spitfire. Lütjens expected that the British could already know that the Bismarck was off port, but the German air reconnaissance reports that he received on the 22nd of May stated that the Royal Navy ships were still anchored in Scapa Flow Naval Base in the Orkneys. This information possibly dispelled Lütjens' doubts, and he led both ships to the Denmark Strait.
So as always, intelligence plays a big factor in these things. You've got the breaking of naval codes, you've got the sighting of ships by spy planes, you've got people on the shore that are relaying information. World War II is such a fascinating war because so many of the things that happened come down to intelligence and counterintelligence. And that was kind of the first war where that was probably a major factor in the outcome of many of the battles.
Hoping that worsening weather would help the German ships to break out into the Atlantic unseen. In the evening of the 23rd of May, they reached the ice limit and set course along Greenland's coast. Though the Denmark Strait was officially 200 nautical miles wide, in late spring it was still considerably obstructed by pack ice, which basically halved its effective width. Soon, despite bad weather and low visibility, the German battle group encountered the HMS Suffolk, a British heavy cruiser equipped with a new type of radar that was tracking them. She soon took cover in the fog, but it was clear for Lütjens that their operation was no longer a secret, and that the intelligence reports of a few days earlier were false. An hour later, the Bismarck spotted another heavy cruiser to its port side, the HMS Norfolk, and Lutyens gave the command to open fire immediately. 5 salvos were fired, but none of them scored a direct hit. Despite this, the Norfolk was unable to fight on equal terms with the much stronger warship, so she set a smoke screen and retreated into the fog.
Smart move.
Still, thanks to the Suffolk's radar, the British cruisers were able to trace the German group. Lutyens was informed that the Bismarck's radar was malfunctioning due to the force of the blasts from her own powerful artillery.
And this is one of the things that, you don't really find out until you get out there on your maiden voyage like this. The blast, think about these powerful, they've got these 15-inch guns. And when they fire them, it shook the ship to the point where it knocked out their own radar. I mean, those are the little kinds of things on which battles turn.
As a result, he ordered the Prince Eugen to take the lead. At this point, he could have tried to turn back and retreat to the Norwegian Sea, but, being encouraged by the bad weather, he decided to continue the mission and steam southwest, hoping to shake off the British cruisers during the night.
And because their radar got knocked out, they have Prince Eugen take the lead, and this will come into play during the Battle of the Denmark Strait.
Lutyens anticipated that the Royal Navy's capital ships were either too far away to intercept his task force or were still anchoring at Scapa Flow. It was a risky but still viable plan. Unfortunately, the bad news was still coming. 6 hours later, at dawn, the Prince Eugen's hydrophones detected the propeller noises of 2 ships on her port side. Lutyens expected another 2 British cruisers. But as these warships got closer, he realized from the size of their superstructures that heavier units were about to challenge him. Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland was approaching the German battle group with a force consisting of 2 capital ships in the lead.
Can we talk about how awesome his name is? Lancelot Holland. All right, that's just cool.
The mighty battlecruiser HMS Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy, and a brand new battleship, the HMS Prince of Wales. The reason behind Holland's aggressive course lay in the characteristics of the Hood's armor. Though her main belt armor was thick, the deck received relatively little protection, leaving the ship vulnerable in long-distance exchanges, where the plunging fire could easily penetrate the armor of her deck.
And let me save you the trouble, guys. I know that you're all going to start telling me, yeah, but Drakenifel's video says that it wasn't the plunging fire. That is not a decided issue. There's still a ton of disagreement about what actually sank the Hood. There's 3 or 4 different theories, and I've read them all in detail. And honestly, nobody can agree on it because nobody really knows for sure. It's always great to have those new theories that everybody can say, oh yeah, but look what they're saying now. And it may be that that's the case. We really don't know for sure.
Being over 12 miles away, the British ships opened fire with their forward turrets. While the Prince of Wales correctly tracked the more dangerous threat of the Bismarck, the Hood mistakenly aimed at the Prince Eugen, which was leading the line and had quite a similar silhouette to the Bismarck's. British initial salvos missed, and soon the Prince of Wales had to fight with malfunctioning armaments, a somewhat expected teething pain. In the meantime, the Hood's next salvos were much closer, throwing splinters across the Prince Eugen's boards. But the German guns remained silent. Lutyens was reluctant to return fire, even though it seemed that engagement was unavoidable. He still had Raeder's orders in mind, which urged him to avoid encounters with equal British units at all costs, as his primary mission was commerce raiding. But it seemed that there was no way out.
And it's because of that after Hood is sunk and Prince of Wales is trying to get away, that while Captain Lindemann of the Bismarck wants to pursue the Prince of Wales, Admiral Lutyens says, no, that's not our mission. Keep going.
His artillery officers made a number of requests to open fire, but Lutyens first took the time to ensure that both of his ship's armaments were aiming at the Hood, and then waited until the optimal moment to strike. Eventually, the Bismarck's guns roared in a full broadside fire, followed by the Prince Eugen's salvo shortly thereafter. The initial fire yielded immediate results, as the Prince Eugen scored a direct hit on the Hood, with a high explosive shell causing a substantial fire on board.
And there are those who will argue that it was that fire that eventually spread to the ammunition and caused the explosion that sunk the Hood.
At this point, the British shells of the Prince of Wales finally reached the Bismarck, penetrating her bow and causing a fuel leak. The Germans still held the advantage, firing full broadside while the Prince of Wales used just half of her guns, and the Hood still mistakenly concentrating her fire on the Prince Eugen. Vice Admiral Holland ordered both of his ships to turn to port so all British guns could shoot at the Germans, thus equalizing the encounter. But virtually a minute later, the unexpected happened. From a distance just short of 9 miles, the Bismarck's fifth salvo reached its target, and one or more shells penetrated the Hood's deck, seemingly without effect. British gunnery officers believed it was a dud, but seconds later, an enormous magazine explosion tore the mighty Hood in two. The explosive effect of the Bismarck's momentous direct hit left German sailors staring in awe, but Admiral Lütjens remained calm and unmoved. Within the next 3 minutes, the blazing pride of the Royal Navy, and for a long time the biggest warship of the world, disappeared from the ocean's surface.
Only 3 men
She sunk with her
survived.
entire 1,400 men crew. Just 3 seamen survived. But the battle didn't end. The Prince of Wales adjusted her course to avoid the sinking wreck of the Hood, and soon suffered concentrated fire from both of the German units, which were both well positioned to switch targets. The distance between all opponents decreased, allowing even the Prince Eugen to fire its secondary armaments and prepare torpedo tubes. Both of Lütjens' warships scored hits on the remaining British unit, causing medium damage. The Prince of Wales, clearly at a huge disadvantage, launched a smokescreen and began to retreat.
And Prince of Wales would go on to be sunk by Japanese planes in December of 1941, and a lot of people mark that moment as the end of the battleship era. This brand new battleship gets sunk by air power, and it was kind of at that point that everyone realized for sure, this is just a couple days after Pearl Harbor, that aircraft carriers are the wave of the future.
A few more salvos were fired by both sides as the distance between the enemies increased, but none reached their targets. The short yet shattering battle of the Denmark Strait thus came to an end. While the Prince Eugen was essentially intact, not having been hit in the battle, the Bismarck was damaged. Her speed was slightly reduced due to the flooding of one of her boiler rooms, and suffered a slight list to the bow and port side. What was more worrying was that one of the British shells had ruptured her bow, causing flooding of one of her forecastle tanks, and causing her to slowly leak precious fuel.
Yeah, and there was water leaking into that fuel tank as well. And yeah, this is the moment when they have to make a decision. Do we continue on to the Atlantic, or do we turn back toward Brest to get help?
Lütjens was considering his options. He was aware that the British would seek revenge for the loss of their symbolic battlecruiser.
Yep.
But he didn't know that the Royal Navy had employed the majority of its available warships to seek and destroy the German task force. The hunt for the Bismarck was about to begin. The hunt for the Bismarck has begun, but if you want to experience manning the bridge of some of history's most iconic battle vessels, then you should play World of Warships.
And it is a lot of fun. I'm going to stop it right there, even though you see the ad. I'm going to put a link in the description to the original video. Please make sure you check them out. BazBattles got a lot of really good stuff. It's a great way to kind of see this level of detail on some things. The narration's great. The information's great. Check it out. Let me know your thoughts about everything we just talked about. Use the comment section below, and we'll see you again tomorrow with some more content. Thanks for watching.